In today's video, I thought I would share 5 tips to learn before picking up a camera. I think what we do is we immediately buy these new flashy cameras, new DSLRs or mirrorless cameras, and we immediately switch it on, jump into the settings and try and figure out the settings. But I do think there's certain things that we need to learn before we actually start using the camera. So what I'm going to do is in this video today is I'm going to show those 5 tips that you should be doing before you actually pick up your camera. So my first tip is actually knowing how your camera works. Well, do you know the difference between manual mode and full auto mode? Or do you know what shutter priority mode does compared to aperture priority mode? Do you know how to change the ISO, or do you know how to change the shutter speed? Do you know how to physically attach a lens to your camera? Do you know how to use the flash? So things like that are useful things to learn and actually to pick up and read and study about before you actually pick up the physical camera. Because I think the hardest bit of actually taking a photograph when you've got a brand new DSLR or mirrorless camera, knowing how to manipulate the camera to produce that image that you want. So it's always worthwhile before you picking up that camera and switching it on is to learn how to get the camera to do what you want it to do. My second tip is to learn the basics of the genre that you want to shoot. So for example, if you want to be a landscape photographer, do you know how composition works? Do you know how light and shadow works in images? Do you know how to predict and look at the weather to see if you're going to get the right conditions for that sunset or sunrise that you might be chasing, or those stormy weather clouds that you might want to produce that great photograph? So it's definitely worth, before you actually pick up your camera and start using it, is to study things like composition and light. Get some apps on your phone that can help you to predict the weather. Knowing how how to predict the weather to get, say, fog in the morning, produce that stunning sunset. So it's always good to know how to choose the right situation to go out shooting before you actually pick up the camera. My third tip is about knowing how to get the right focus on your camera. Focus is such an important part of photography and taking photographs. If you show an image and it's completely out of focus, or there's a point where, for example, you've got the focus point in the wrong place. So for example, if you're taking a picture of a person and their face is completely out of focus, but the background behind them is completely in focus, that's going to be a poor image, and a lot of people are just going to be turned off by that photograph. So it's important to know how to focus your camera, and also to choose the right focusing mode for your camera. So cameras come with different focusing modes and different ways of focusing the image, and also different focus points. So for example, a lot of the more higher end modern cameras have up to some have hundreds of focus points, some have smaller ones. So it's knowing how to select those focus points, and also, do you use a larger focus point or a smaller focus point? It's important before you actually pick up the camera to actually know how to focus and manipulate your camera in the right way. So it sort of stems off from the first point that I made about knowing how your camera works. But the one thing that will turn a person looking at an image off is a blurry photograph, and to be honest with you, I've been very guilty of it. I've picked up cameras and not known how to focus them properly. So it's not only just about how to focus the camera, it's knowing how to manipulate that camera to get the right focus, and that can be done by studying how to figure out focus points and where to put your focus points. So for example, in most images, if you've got a prominent foreground in your image, so for example, if you're taking a photograph of a rock and a prominent background, you might want to focus on the rock in front of you. Also, if you've got a camera that you might want to focus stack an image, so you might want to focus for one shot on your rock in front of your image, and then you might want to focus for the midground, and then focus for the background. So if you've got some dramatic mountains in the background, you might want to focus for them. So it's knowing how to focus and where to place your focus points can be very good before you actually pick up that camera. My fourth point actually comes on to the last point that I made, and it's knowing how depth of field works. Depth of field is actually the distance that is actually in focus in the camera. So for example, if you want that lovely blurred background, you actually shorten the depth of field, so you actually so you want the subject in focus and then your background completely out of focus. Whereas if you for example doing a dramatic landscape and you want every part of that image, you would actually extend your depth of field to make sure that every point was in focus. So knowing how depth of field works can be a great thing to study up before you actually pick up the camera, and you don't have to go into the mathematics of it and all the the advanced theory behind depth of field. It's more about knowing how to get a blurry background if you need a blurry background, or if you want something more in focus than others. So it's more about knowing which aperture settings to use on your camera. So it's a great thing to actually study depth of field and how it works. And the last point for me that I'm going to share in this video today is knowing what accessories to buy. The one thing that a lot of photographers tend to forget is that when they go out to spend a huge amount of money on this new sparkly camera that they have that does all these wonderful features, they seem to forget things that they need extra to actually take those photographs. So for example, I can't stress the importance of having a good tripod if you're a landscape photographer. Having a nice steady platform for an image, if you're going to do long exposures, or if you're going to have a situation where the light is faded because you're approaching sunset, or if you're in the morning and it's just becoming daylight, you're going to be experiencing long shutter speeds. So for the importance of having a good tripod is I think is as important as having a good camera, if not more important. But there's also accessories such as remote shutter releases for when you're doing those long exposures, because if you're doing a long exposure, or if you have an extended shutter speed because the light's fading, is obviously you don't want to touch that camera. You want to touch the camera as less as possible, because that's going to introduce shake, and also it'll introduce blur into your images. So important things such as having a remote release, or even having an L bracket, so that if you have an L bracket on your camera, you can switch your camera from portrait to landscape without actually physically manipulating your tripod and actually getting the image different to what you want before. So it's important before you actually pick up the camera to know what accessories you're going to buy for that camera. I hope you found those tips useful. It's always important, and I think it's always something to think about before you actually pick up a camera, is to know how your camera works and what accessories and what things you're going to buy. As I said earlier in my video, earlier in my introduction, I think when we buy this camera, we run to get it out the box, get all the accessories on, switch it on, plug the battery in, and then we go out and take images, and we come back a bit disappointed with those images because they're not the quality that we might see online. And I think the reason that those images online are slightly better than what you may take with your new camera is because those photographers know how to take a good image. And taking a good image is far more important than the piece of equipment in your hand. So I think it's important to go out and learn certain things before you actually pick up the camera. I hope you enjoyed this video today. If you like what you see, then please, give it a thumbs up below. I'd love for more people to come and watch my videos, so if you haven't subscribed already, I'd love you to do so. And if you've got any comments, then please leave them below. And hopefully I will see you again next time.